Today we're going to be talking about ego, everyone's favorite in LA, right? No one that lives in LA needs to have a definition of the word ego, right? In the first one I talked about what power is, where do we get power, and how do we keep it, right? And a lot of those ideas were if you get power from outside yourself, right, the Powerball, it's going to be tricky to hang on to and people can take it away. But if you have power on the inside of you and it comes from inside out, that's how we find true power and power that's sustainable and maybe not as malicious as a lot of the tyrannical types of power that we see going around, right? So I think it's really important to talk about ego. Because for those of you guys that have gone to maybe some spiritual places or done some spiritual disciplines here in Los Angeles, what do you guys hear about the ego? Bad, ego bad, no ego. You guys have too much ego, right? That's what they all say. Do you guys really think that's true? No, it's so dumb and it makes me so mad. There is nothing evil about your ego, okay? Your ego is what is enabling you to be walking around on the planet Earth right now, right? The ego is what keeps us on Earth. When we have total eradication of ego and total eradication of the self, you guys think you're going to stick around? No, you're going to jam. That's it, kaput. No ego, no living, no self, right? So it's really one of the biggest misunderstandings in spiritual teachings that I see prevalent amongst nearly all of them. And you know what the most terrible thing about it is that they'll tell you that the ego is evil, and then they'll use it to guilt trip you through shame to perform within their group. So, do you guys think it's weird that a lot of different religions and spiritual places will tell you that the ego is evil, and then they'll tell you have to eradicate your ego, and then, oh my God, you're brainwashed and in a cult. Do you think that's weird? Maybe that's coincidental? I don't think so. How could a place that tells you ego is evil and bad, and then they say, okay, now go shave your head, and you gotta wear the same clothes as everybody else. Now you gotta drink this Kool-Aid, just like everybody else. Oh, you don't want to drink the Kool-Aid? Evil ego. Do what everybody else is doing, right? It's really, really kind of insidious whenever anybody tells you that you need to eradicate your ego and your decisions and your ideas and just follow along with what they say. That is not spirituality, okay? If you guys leave today with anything, an understanding of that is the most important, okay? Just because you can follow along with what someone else says does not mean that you're holy and doing the right thing, okay? This is how things get all messed up. Look at what happens in these religions that tell you to eradicate your ego. What happens? With all of them.
Abuse of power.
Abuse of power. You got a bunch of people, no egos now. That's awesome. I can make you guys do whatever I want. Right? You become a tyrant. When there's a bunch of egoless slaves following everything you're going to do, it leads to tyranny. And I don't care if it's Jesus Christ saying it. I don't care if it's Buddha saying it. It doesn't matter. It leads only to slavery, right? How do you guys think slavery happens, right? How does that, can you guys just for a second imagine in your head like how slavery goes down? Like there's a whole nation of people and all of a sudden they just go down into slavery for an entire other nation of people. How is that possible? This has even happened before guns. Like, okay, you got guns and nuclear weapons, I can understand how you can enslave an entire nation. But how do you do that, like, back in olden times, there wasn't even guns?
Shame.
shame, right? Egolessness, powerlessness. They trick them.
Controlling resources.
Control. All of these kind of things are what enable people to make slaves of other people. And for those of you guys that were at the equinox ritual that I did, I talked about this and I harped about it a lot because the idea of slavery in humanity is something that is so unacceptable and so prevalent throughout the history of the world and countries. What? There's still slavery in Los Angeles, okay? There are slaves here in the city of LA right now. People kept as slaves, whether it's in mansions and they're their housekeepers because they were bought from Ethiopia. That's going on right now. Sex slave trade, that's happening too, right? You name it. There's tons of slaves all around us. How do you guys think that happens? They got no ego and no power, right? So they are kept as a slave under threat of tyranny. Okay? And I wanted to read you guys this quote from my handy-dandy Mysterium Conjunctionis. This is by Carl Jung. I know it's like really beefy, but if you guys ever wanted to read a book, this is a pretty good one. Although it's very arduous. And he talks a lot about the ego. You know, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud argued an awful lot about the ego and its purpose, right? There's a whole volumes of Sigmund Freud ranting about the ego and then Carl Jung ranting about the ego and its purpose. And they clashed on quite a few of the points. Now, the thing that I like best about Carl Jung's version of the ego is that he takes into account the history of the world and other cultures. It's kind of funny because Freud looks at the ego only through his point of view, which is kind of hilarious. But Carl Jung incorporates like India and China and history and, you know, all those good things. So this is a really good quote that Carl Jung says about the ego. He says, "It is the rooted conviction of the West that God and the ego are worlds apart. In India, on the other hand, their identity was taken as self-evident. It was the nature of the Indian mind to become aware of the world-creating significance of the consciousness manifested in man." Right? Did you guys catch that? That means our ego is our expression of God. That's kind of like a heavy idea to think about, right? Especially when you've been taught that your ego is evil. But it's actually through the ego that we get to God. That's what he's saying, right? He says, "The West, on the contrary, has always emphasized the littleness, weakness, and sinfulness of the ego, despite the fact that it elevated man to the status of divinity." Okay, that's like the most important little paragraph right there, right? It's like a little key, like a little clue. If you want to get to spirituality, you want to get to God, how are you going to do that? Well, you're you in your little suit walking around, so how are you going to get to God in your you suit? You're going to get there through you, right? Because there's no other door. Unless you're going to like take you and put you in a cat or something. And then maybe you can like get to God through the cat. Which is probably possible. Cats are probably better at that stuff than we are. But so it's totally logical that this is what you got. This is what you're in. So how are you going to do anything except through this? Except through this, right? And I think the saddest thing is that it's the misunderstanding of that that causes the kind of evil, though I don't really believe in evil, expression of someone's self-identity, right? And I love that Carl Jung used that word, identity. He says ego is identity with God. You guys remember in the symbol lecture I talked about the word identity. Identity is the I, who I am. And identity is the same as identical. It's the same id that Freud uses. That ID, your driver's license is your ID, it's your id, it's your identity, right? That means the same. Identity means how are you the same as everything. But we always think of identity as what splits us apart, right? What's special? Because we all have specialitis, right? I'm so special. I'm better than you. You know? It's prevalent. There's a lot of it going around. So you can think about that when you think about your ego and who you are, because this is what we're saying. We're saying you use your ego to get to God. Who are you? Who's the you that's going to get there? And we all have this like thing that's me. I like this, and I eat this, and this is my family, and I live here, and that's me, right? So I always stress it's important for you to think about what are those things you identify yourself with. It makes you you. And then usually we don't do that unless we lose them, right? If you lose everything that you own or have or people that are close to you, then you really go through what they call an identity crisis. Oh, now I got no stuff. Who am I now? Right? All those rich, stockbrokers lose all the money, then they go commit suicide. Their ego has gone and dissipated, right? No ego, they jam. When people lose their ego, they take off, right? So when you get stripped of all those self-identifying factors, that's when people have their crashes. When they lose loved ones, when they go through divorces, when they lose their house, when they lose, whatever. Loss is the quickest way for eradication of the ego that will lead to a very dangerous position. However, if you have bothered to take a little time to find out who you are outside of those things, without those external things that give you power, you'll find that you're totally cool if you lose your house, if somebody dies. I mean, not totally cool. Obviously, you still have grief, but you're not going to go and commit suicide, right? Because you still are retaining yourself even through that loss of the thing that you thought that you were. You can come back from it and phoenix out because there are other factors making who you are. You guys all know that, right? You guys don't have that problem. It's other people, right? If you guys know what I'm talking about, you can see it all over the country, right? Look at what's happening in New York right now. When people suffer such gigantic losses, they lose identity because external forces are used to identify themselves. If you guys are artists or musicians, you guys go through this. It's so easy to get identified if you get like a super popular song or like a show that's really huge. Now you're identified with that. That's you. If you want to make your, folk album now, who's going to buy your folk album? They want the heavy metal. Right? Now all of a sudden, who are you? Right? No ticket sales. Boo. Right? So then you get identified externally by other people, and then that jacks you up as well, right? Someone might see you as, she's slutty, so I'm going to treat her this way, right? Or, oh, he's a nerd, I'm not going to talk to him. So we deal not only with our own identity issues, but by how other people identify us as well, which could be based on art we make, the way that we look, the way that we behave, the actions that we do, and our behaviors. You guys know what that's called, right? Judgment. Judgment is inextricably bound with the ego, right? It's the discerning factor that allows us to compartmentalize things and identify things. Judgment, right? And then, you guys know only God is your judge, right? Everyone knows that, right? Okay, cool. So how we judge people's expression of their ego can have serious repercussions, right? Because we all live in a society. And that's how we make communities and families, and we make political systems, right? Those are all tied in with ego issues. You guys, all the ego issues we face as individuals, those go meta when you get into political systems and countries and communities, right? Because your ego is identified in a certain manner in a community, and if they have a judgment against that, you're gonna get in some trouble, okay? It's not always just like she's slutty, but it could be like, oh, let's shoot this person because they're this. They're Jewish, so let's throw them on a train. So it's not a joke, right? And again, those same ego-identifying issues are what lead to tyranny, right? Oh, you're black? You're a slave now, right? I'm not going to talk to you. You go in that school, right? You got to go do that. This is where all of this goes. So these issues get put onto larger levels, which, I mean, I can only say we have only seen the tip of the iceberg with in what's happening in our political system, right? You guys have been paying attention to all this stuff, right? It's getting really intense. And it's only going to get worse. So the more power that we can have through our own ego, the less we will be inclined to fall victim to tyranny and possibly become a nation of slaves. You guys, there's already a lot of slavery happening in our nation. You guys know how many people are slaves? Not just in insidious ways, but in their jobs and to their, debts that they owe and all that kind of good stuff. There's more covert methods of slavery. It can be pretty sneaky, So your ego can be this mechanism. It's a mechanism. It's what takes you from here to there. It's what helps you make your decisions. But it's also can get stuff done and do stuff. Now, if society judges your ego as evil, like let's say, we'll take an extreme example, right? Well, how can someone's identity be evil? So you can look at like a serial killer, right? Look at Ted Bundy. Okay, Ted Bundy was probably in his mind really truly like being himself and what he thought was like, this is who I am, right? Look at the Marquis de Sade. You guys ever read Marquis de Sade? He was irascible in his expression that I can do this to people, I can torture people because that's just who I am. That's what makes me me, right? That's my ego, that's my identity. And then, other people say that and they're like, wait, that's not cool. Ted Bundy, that's not cool, Ted Bundy. We're going to put you in jail now. And, you're going to have to be punished for the expression of who you are. So this is where it gets weird. Like, how is it that part of who you are could be punishable by the rest of the community? This is a pretty big issue, right? That's where we get to the judgment, evil business. Because we all have parts of ourselves that are unacceptable. We all have unacceptable parts. You guys catch what I'm saying? There's things that we might like or be drawn to or want to do that we're told, no, don't do that. But I want to do that. That looks good. Why can't I do that? Right? This is the secret. I'm going to tell you guys a secret. The problem is not that the ego is evil. The problem is that people are not operating in the entirety of their full, complete self. They are acting through a tiny little part of themselves that has been denied or repressed or unacceptable, right? The person, the ego, is not evil. The problem is they're only being a little teeny tiny part of themselves, right? Like in your body, a cell will go cancer, right? Everybody's cool in your body, all the cells. Think of your cells as little people. It's kind of fun. All your cells are little people, and everybody's all getting along. And then all of a sudden, one of the cells is like the Hitler cell or the Ted Bundy cell, right? So the Ted Bundy cell goes, right? And then cancer starts to go. Because that little cell is doing something unacceptable that in the society of cells is going to jack everybody else up. And then the entire society is going to fall, like Hitler, right? Because that cancer cell is not operating at its full capacity in the entire sense of its wholeness of being. That's why. The cancer cell is not evil. It's just not complete and operating at maximum capacity, right? Just like slaves, through oppression, they are now no longer operating at maximum capacity. Just like the tyrant is only an expression of its like little tiny evil compartment, now the slave is also gets in this weird dynamic where now it's no longer operating at maximum ego capacity, right? So I really feel like the trick is not the eradication of the ego. You don't need to get rid of your entire sense of yourself and who you are. That's how you do stuff. What you need to do is use your entire ego. Don't get rid of it, use the whole thing. Then you're going to be able to get to God, to help other people, to do more great stuff, right? It's really, if you guys think about any of the raddest things that you've done in your life, it's like think about right now. This is good to think about. Think about the best thing you've ever done in your whole life, right? Was it because of something that you're really good at that you were able to help someone else with in that moment because you knew how to do that thing? Because of something that you had learned and you could do, right? It had to do with you because you're the one that did it. Maybe it was a little sacrificial or something like that, but it was through you that you were able to perform that operation. And in those moments, we're operating at full capacity. Because it's only through knowledge of yourself that you're able to do anything. Otherwise, you're going to be open to other people's influence. And you're going to do things other people are telling you and other people are kind of suggesting. But if you know yourself, you're operating at full capacity. You guys know what's written above the temples in Egypt? Know thyself. You guys think they put that up there accidentally? You guys know what all the Greek philosophers say? Know thyself, right? Because if you know who you are and you know yourself, that is going to open your ability to do anything. If you do not know yourself, you cannot discern it from anything else, you're like a piece of wood drifting in the ocean. Helpless, right? And I don't mean just because you know yourself you can't be put in situations where you might not have power, but you always have the power to decide how you're going to act in those helpless situations. There's a difference. The victim is so subsumed by the tyrant that they'll die in fear. The hero will maybe get killed by the tyrant, but they will die as themselves. You guys see what the difference is there? It's a pretty big difference and important. I looked up the word hero because I really like heroes, you guys. You know, they have so much bummer news all the time. And And there's so many people operating at full ego capacity that do so many amazing, miraculous things. These are my favorite stories ever, and they hardly ever tell them. So if you guys are at parties, can you tell hero stories, please? I know it's fun to gossip about slut, you know, but and make judgments on Ted Bundy. But it's also really fun to remember and tell stories of heroes that through their ego and who they were able to sometimes maybe save one life, right? Save somebody's life. Have any of you guys ever saved somebody's life? Oh no, nobody's raising their hand. Okay, good. Come on. It's cool. Save people's lives. Anybody ever seen anybody save someone's life? Save somebody's life? That's pretty crazy. You'd hope someone would do it for you, right? Come on, save my life. Do it. Don't just sit there and film it on YouTube. That's what people do. So, I'm kind of obsessed with heroes and stories of these people that through themselves and their abilities are able to alter and change even just one life. But then, you guys, there's people that can save tens of thousands of lives. Can you guys imagine that? What if you could save 10,000 people's lives through just one action that you did? That's powerful. That's power. Right? Beautiful power. So I was looking at the word hero and did a little word nerding, as I'm so apt to do. And this is really interesting, you guys. Do you guys know what the word hero comes from? What it means? Watcher. Watcher. Someone who's looking, someone who sees. It's also like demigod, right? Because heroes in olden times, in Bible times, you guys know who the heroes were, right? They were the Nephilim, the half-angel people. So the angels would come down and have sex with people. It's true. And then they had kids. And the kids were called the Nephilim. It's in Genesis 6.1. It's the Bible, so it's true. So they would have kids with people, and then these were the supermen, the superheroes. These people had like supernatural abilities and could save tons of people because they were big and strong. And some of them were really mean and tyrants because they had power, right? Like David and Goliath. Goliath was one of the ancestors of the Nephilim. He was one of the demigods, one of the heroes, right? So, watcher, if you look up what watch means, you guys know what watch means? It means be awake. Wake up. So, a hero is someone who's paying attention and is awake to what is going on. And this is what I mean by someone who's not filming it on YouTube, but they have the wherewithal and the consciousness to respond. If you're not a hero, you're not paying attention. All you have to do to be a hero is be aware of yourself, be aware of your surroundings, and constantly act accordingly in that moment that you are in. You guys know how like most heroes happen, like that you hear about now, it's because like there's a dude in a bank and someone's like robbing the bank and the dude is like this big buff dude and he's like, hey! Because he was there and he was watching. He was awake, right? On the bus in LA this one time, there was this big bodybuilder guy like sitting in the front seat. This means bodybuilder. It's American Sign Language, I think. And this guy got on the bus and he didn't even have a weapon. He just started yelling at the bus driver to give him all the money. And the bus driver was like, what? And the big buff guy was like, no, you don't get the money. And so he like chased him off the bus. And it's because he was aware, he was paying attention. He was there and he was awake. That's a hero, right? I got just a couple of sort of random examples of heroes. I wish I could just like tell hero stories all day because I love them. But this one was really good. do you guys remember this? It happened. There's so many of the hero stories that happen in Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan all the time. I know that the situations over there are so gnarly, but you guys, these are just like people. Any of you guys know veterans from Afghanistan or Iraq or Iran? Anybody have friends that went over there? Yeah, so these are just dudes, okay? And then they're put in this unbelievable situation where they're told by a tyrant to shoot a bunch of people, okay? Slaves, you guys. On a pretty gnarly level. Can you guys imagine? Can you imagine getting put in that situation? Heavy duty, right? So this guy, his name was Sergeant Dennis Wetchett, 29 years old. This was in March 2012. He was in Afghanistan, and there was all these convoy trucks going down the street, and there was a bunch of kids in the street because they were picking up the empty shells because they can sell them for money. So these kids just run into the street and they go and grab the shells and they take them and they can get like, probably like a penny for it, which then they probably give to their slave owners because they're all slaves too. So this officer saw, he was watching, right? He was watching. He saw a little girl run out and saw she was going to get hit by one of the convoys. He runs, this little Afghani girl, she was maybe like 6 years old. So he runs into the street, picks her up and throws her out of the way, and then he gets nailed by the truck and killed, right? Hero style. Because of his ego and who he was a soldier. He was there fighting against Afghani people, okay? He was told to shoot people in that country. But because he was paying attention, instead his ego made the decision to go and sacrifice his life in order to save that little girl, right? That's what hero is. Through his ego. Through his ego. Do you guys think he would have done that if he had annihilated his ego? Probably not, right? Then there's another guy that I like to talk about, because everyone's familiar with Oskar Schindler, right? Schindler's List. So, I mean, obviously, he's a hero. He's getting told by the Nazis to do something. Again, a tyrant making slaves. He's told by the Nazis to do something, and instead, his ego, through who he is and what his abilities are, decides to save thousands of people's lives, right? There's this other guy called Aristides de Sousa Mendes. You guys probably haven't heard of him, huh? He's on the sly hero style. He didn't even get recognized for his heroic efforts until like 1980. He was in Portugal. He was the head of the kind of French embassy, and he was in charge of giving out visas and passports to people in World War II during the Nazi regime. He was told not to distribute any to Jewish people. He was told by his authority figure, his tyrant, that if any Jews come asking you for a visa, you don't give them that. No way, Jose. But you know what he did? He was like, and he gave thousands of them visas. He's all, here, take this, get it, go, get. So because of that one person, thousands of people were able to live, right? He then gets fired, you know. So it's at the sacrifice of himself. Through himself, in a sacrificial act, he's able to use that ego because of his job, his placement, who he was identified with. He gave people identities in order to get them out and save their life, right? Pretty amazing. And this is just one dude making a little bit of an effort, you know? Just a little bit of an effort. And it's in the face of a tyrant, you know? So how can you, all by yourself, use yourself to get at and access your superhero, right? That's basically what you're looking at. How are you going to be able to perform in your maximum capacity? Because you guys know what happens when you kind of lose some of your ego and you maybe become a little slavey? You guys know what happens? This is, in my opinion, how a lot of disease goes down and a lot of possession happens. Have you guys heard of entity possession? I know it's very in vogue right now. Oh, you have an entity. You go to any shaman place in LA, oh, you have an entity. Right? Have you guys ever been in a place in LA and they told you you had an entity? How many people? Come on. I have. Told me I got an entity. It's cool. You guys know what the word entity means? It means thing. It means thing. Insidious, right? You have a thing. You got a thing there. I can see it like a dark spot on your cheek. There's a thing right there. So I wanted to take a little time to kind of demystify this whole entity possession thing, because you guys can spend hundreds of dollars getting someone to take your entity off. You guys ever spent a bunch of bucks to get an entity removed? Well, it's out there, trust me. A lot of people charge you a lot of money to get rid of your entity. So this is the thing, though. Possession is not a joke. Have you guys ever seen anybody go down, spiral down, get like kind of possessed and weird? You're like, you're not you right now. This is not you. This is what you say. You say like, you are not yourself. Have you guys ever had to say that to someone? You are not yourself right now. You're not operating in maximum ego capacity. There's some Hitler compartment that's coming through. You need to get all your other stuff turned on so you can fight against the Hitler compartment. So this is the thing, you guys. Entity or demonic possession, this is a little theory I have, and maybe it's not true, but it's just something that I like to think about when I'm hanging out on my couch. What is the demon possession? That's exactly how it came into my head, too. Because I was sitting on my couch thinking about demon possession, because it's what I do. A possession is when you are taken over by something else. You are not you, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean something else physically comes and gets in you, like a ghost or a demon or like an entity or like what do they call it in Hebrew? What's that word?
Divot?
Yeah, totally, divot. Exactly. That some outside force comes in, gets into you, and then now you're that, possessed. But it's really this idea that you are not entirely you, and your ego's not strong enough to fight it off. Just like the cancer. This is the thing. Do you guys know it takes one virus to infect your body? There was this article in Science Daily. There's a lot of like scientists that for a long time said, no, you need like a whole cluster. You need like a whole bunch of them. They all go together and they travel in groups and you get the virus and then it takes over your body. But no, they found, this was in like 2009, they did this study at a Canadian university, that it only takes one particle of virus to infect your entire body. You guys know how big a virus is? So teeny tiny, I can't even make my fingers that teeny tiny. You guys know how big your body is? It's like, here's the teeny tiny virus, and here's your body, and that teeny tiny thing gets in, and then you're dead like 2 days later if it's Ebola, right? That's crazy. Now you're not you, you're Ebola. Literally, your physical body has been taken over by an entity. You got a thing there. There's a thing in you, and it's growing bigger, and now you're not you so much, now you're this thing. Now you're not you so much, now you're mostly cancer. Those people that have 300-pound tumors, they're more tumor than them. They weigh less than their tumor. Entity possession, you got a thing there, right? So the idea of a possession is actually anything that can take you over to the extent that it's more you than you. That can be a substance. You got more alcohol in you than you right now. You're not you, you're alcohol right now. And I can smell it all over you, right? You're not you, you're that, you're Prozac right now. I'm talking to Prozac right now. There's no one driving. I'm having a conversation with Prozac right now. Right? So, this is the interesting thing though, is how we operate within these things in our body and our system. As long as we're ourselves in entirety, they don't take us down. Like parasites too. How many of you guys have parasites? Like anyone's gonna raise their hand. I'll tell you, the majority. Right? We all got it. Okay? You guys know how many Americans have herpes? Not me. That'll keep you guessing. Wonder how many date emails I'll get tonight. No. Almost everyone has some kind of herpes, because you guys know a form of herpes is cold sores. Yeah, that's what everybody said. That's not what I was thinking. Chicken pox. Chicken pox. How many of you guys had chicken pox? Oh, you all have herpes. Go herpes. And it stays in your body and then can get re-expressed when you're a grown-up. How many of you guys have known someone that had shingles? That is chicken pox that gets re-expressed later on, because this is really creepy. It's been living in your body the whole time. You don't re-get it. It's been hanging out inside your body from the time you were like 3 years old, and now you're 30, and now you got shingles. Okay? Possession has taken you over. But the majority of the time, you were your whole self, and the chickenpox was just kind of hanging out. So it wasn't taking you over. You know what happens when it develops and takes you over into shingles? You weaken. And it takes advantage of that. It says, oh, look at this. I don't see any white blood cells around. You guys see any white blood cells? Let's go. Yeah, shingles. That's how it works. When you're operating as yourself in entirety, you can keep the shingles at bay. The evil that lives within you does not get expressed. The inappropriate parts are just hanging out and do not get visible expression. I can't even tell you how many organisms this is possible for other than chickenpox. Do you guys know one of the main things that takes us out? I know I've mentioned this a few times. That most people die of? Pneumonia. Pneumonia is a bacteria that lives in your lungs for your entire life. Why doesn't it kill you? Because your ego is operating pretty well. When you get old or messed up or jacked up or sick, or you get AIDS, it's like, oh, AIDS just ate all the white blood cells. I don't see any white blood cells here. Let's go. Pneumonia. Right? That's what happens. It's how you get possessed. So this is a really important thing to remember. If you want to do ego eradication, you're messing up your defense system. If you have no ego, now you cannot defend yourself against a tyrant. You cannot defend yourself against some jerk that tells you you're a slut. You can't slap him in the face because you're like, oh, I must be slutty. No. I wonder if he'll like me if I'm a slut. Sadly, this is the internal dialogue of my women. You cannot defend yourself against pneumonia. You're like, oh, I have pneumonia now. Guess I'm kaput. That's it. No ego, no defense, right? The trick is, this is what's tricky, and I think this is what the Eastern religions actually talk about. They're not talking about the evilness of the ego. They're trying to make sure that you don't act through your evil parts. They're trying to tell you not to act through your pneumonia or your shingles. Act through your entire self, right? But it's real easy to get confused. Well, what is that? What part of me is pneumonia and what part of me is me? Where's the chickenpox in there, and how is that different from the rest of me? And now you get back to the identity issues, right? Who am I? Am I chickenpox? Am I this disease? If you guys have ever known anyone with a disease, it becomes part of their identity. Oh, that guy, he's got AIDS. That's the AIDS guy. That guy right there. I wasn't pointing at you. So, how do you guys think that is? That you get identified with a disease? That's messed up. What? How can we identify people by diseases? That's the herpes girl, not me though. It's true, it's true. So you have to think about, like, how is that differentiation and things that you identify with keeping even parts of yourself separated from you? Because you'll think, I'm not pneumonia, I don't have herpes. That's not me, right? Well, guess what? If it's an evil, shadow, dark part of you, you better be like, okay, I'm going to incorporate it. Because guess what is your immune system? Do you guys know what your immune system does to those evil things? It eats them. Now you've digested it, taken it into you. You're not separating it, making it not part of you. You eat it, and now it has become part of your body, and you can use it to do stuff. You know what your white blood cell does when it eats it? It gets stronger. It's food. So the trick is you take all your evil parts and you eat them and you get stronger, right? Let's say you got an evil part of you that wants to just beat everybody up all the time because you like hitting people. I like hitting people, so I do martial arts. Now I have eaten an evil part of me and I use it in a heroic fashion. Okay? This is really funny, you guys, because my astrological chart is very similar to Ted Bundy's. We have the same birthday. He was born on November 24th, just like me. And his chart is very similar. So, of course, if you can imagine, when I saw that, I was like, what? And then I was like, okay, what? And then I was like, okay, how am I like Ted Bundy? Well, I did huge amounts of dissection. I took every animal apart you can imagine, even people. I dissected a bunch of people. But it was put in a proper context because I did it in biology class and in anatomy class. So now that very unacceptable thing is suddenly acceptable because it's put in proper context, right? I have taken many, many classes and credits in psychology, which in fact is what Ted Bundy studied in school. So there's many parts of Ted Bundy that are very similar to me. He went to the University of Washington. I grew up in Seattle. How's that for freaky? Suddenly, parts of my identity are the same as Ted Bundy's identity, right? And this becomes important too, because if you separate your identity from a tyrant or an evil person or someone else, now what's happening? Now your judgment is seeing them as the cancer cell that can take you over, right? Bless you. So you do not want to do that. And that is how evil takes us over, through fear. Because if you're afraid to eat it, it's going to eat you. Literally, physically, the pneumonia is going to eat your flesh and tissue all up until all of you is gone and there's nothing left but pneumonia. But if you eat it, now you're stronger. Superhero Ted Bundy. I am superhero Ted Bundy. All of the evil things that he did to other people, I use those same traits to help other people. Because I took apart all this stuff and I studied human anatomy, I can help heal people. And I do healings. And I study herbs and medicine. And I use my psychological knowledge in readings in order to help people with problems that they have, instead of using it as a power play, to mess with their head. So it's the same things, but I'm using them differently. See what I mean? It's not evil. You use your identifying factors, and you can do great stuff, right? If you can take those evil parts of you to do good stuff, then you can be a hero. Because I studied martial arts, I saved someone from getting beat up and maybe killed. But at the possible sacrifice to myself, it's probably stupid, right? because I could have gotten killed. But I was watching, right? Watching. Carl Jung says that exact same thing in the book, that it's through our ego that we can find out about our evil parts. Because like I said, it's just you doing it. It's not the cat, right? You can try and put it in the cat and then maybe have the cat go. But the truth is, you just got you, and everything you do is through you. So it's your son, your ego, that's going to allow all of those things to get identified and to see them. And astrology is a really good example, because when you're operating in your full capacity, you are not just your sun sign. You're where all your other planets are too. You're your Venus and Scorpio. You're your Mars and Leo. You're your everything, right? Every single part of you has to come together in a unified manner in order to properly act, right? And that's how we utilize the ego in a proper way, not through eradication. Have you guys ever met anyone that had no ego? I don't even know what that means. Like when you go, it's so stupid. You go, I'm not going to like brag on Golden Bridge. It's a lovely place with lovely people. But I've had an experience there where they mention like, you must get rid of your ego. And I'm looking at these people like, you have so much ego right now. I can't even handle it. And you're asking me for $40 to get rid of my ego. So don't do that. Next time someone asks you, you need to get rid of your ego, tell them, what do you mean? And then I want you to ask them, have you done that? That's the next question I want to come out of your mouth. Did you do it? And if they say yes, they're a liar. They're a liar. Right? So don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. And I wanted to mention too that when we can operate in our full capacity, like that, like that soldier who saved that little girl, this is what I want to see, and what we can kind of start right here is that instead of having these things in our society where there's a leader and then a bunch of people, they're just brainwashed and doing the thing that they're telling them, whether it's a religion, whether it's a family, whether it's an army, how about if we have an army of generals instead of an army of soldiers? Right? Can you guys imagine how rad that would be? It would be like the Avengers. What if every single soldier in the army wasn't just following orders, but they were actually operating their entire ego capacity? Every single one. Because in Afghanistan right now, do you guys know what would happen? War would be eradicated. Because everybody would be awesome. What if every single slave started operating in their full ego capacity? What do you guys think would happen? Maybe there wouldn't be any more slaves. Because you guys know how things change. Someone stands up and they go, hey, knock it off. And maybe they'll die. Maybe they'll die. You're not always going to make it. Listen, this is the thing. In order to truly be yourself and your entire self, you're not always going to win. Okay? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Okay? Remember in the first lecture where I talked about nonviolence and Gandhi and Martin Luther King, nonviolence is not passive. Remember, Gandhi said, you must pit your entire soul against the tyrant. Your entire soul. That's not passive. Just because they're not being violent doesn't mean they're not actively engaging in a heroic function. Sometimes that means you're going to get killed. Sometimes that means you're going to get run over by a truck because you're some dude from the middle of America that's in Afghanistan and you see a little girl that's going to die. That's what that means sometimes. But if you do not act in your full capacity and you see some buyakashe going on, now you're a slave through your inaction. Obviously, you need to make good decisions, and none of us want to risk our lives for something pointless or fruitless. which certainly happens many, many times. But this could be something that we are faced with in the upcoming future, you guys. America has more tyrannical things going on than any of the countries that we're fighting with. There's actually revolutions happening in the other countries that we're tyranting out on. It's so stupid, right? So we need to get ahead of the game here and make armies of generals within our communities where everyone is encouraged to operate at their full ego capacity, recognizing everybody's things, look at their entities, let them know, like, hey man, you are not yourself right now. And help them be more themselves through their ego, through the things that make them strong, that make them who they are. Because you guys know when you're all you, you are the universe, you are God. Your ego is God. So when you operate at full capacity, just like Carl Jung said, you're operating at God level. Okay? That's when you get to have the full power of the potential of humanity, is when you're operating at your full ego capacity. That's when it goes. Not when you're getting taken over by pneumonia or whatever. Which isn't to judge people with diseases. There's all kinds of reasons that can happen. You can have a disease and still be operating within your full ego capacity, right? But you just have to make sure you're driving. You're watching. So just pay attention. And if you see some tyrannical stuff going on, tell the tyrant, you are not yourself right now. Or you would not be tyranting out on me. You would be telling me I'm awesome. If anyone tells you that you're not awesome, you correct them. And you tell them they got a little thing right there. A little cold sore. Right? That's what I have for today. Thanks, you guys.